Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Soul Shine Radio. I am delighted and honored to have the lovely Sacha Sterling here today. If you want to say hello.
Hey, Lindsay. Hello. I'm so happy to be here on your show.
Yeah, and we were catching up before this, and we talk pretty much on the regular, and it feels just like another conversation that the world just gets to hear some of the conversations and the richness and the lightness and the depth that we get to cover. So I pulled up your website, sachasterling.com, and I just read your short bio here. And I'm just going to read a few things. And what I loved is that you said for the last 20 years, you've poured your energy and focus into the exploration of human consciousness, emotional and relational innovation, and most of all, love in action. So I think I kind of want to start there. 20 years is a long time. I imagine through some personal experiences, right? You've explored your own consciousness and emotional and relational innovations and how your relationship with self and with other has evolved. And of course, I would love to hear what it means to be love in action. So let's just dive right in wherever you want to start with that.
Oh my, yes. Well, I had never heard anyone else say relational innovation, emotional and relational innovation, and it really is one of the things that drives me and my curiosity and love of humans and connection and just all the places we go. I'd say always lived life all in. There have been times where but like just that love of life, that love of the experience. And so for the first 18 years, it was very much like just whatever came, I was fully immersed and experienced in. And then when I was about 19, it was as if God picked me off of one path and put me on another. And it was the first intentional leadership program that I went to. My mom sent me and my sister to Debbie Ford's 3-day shadow process workshop. And she really advocated for us to get in because they thought we were too young. And I'm so grateful that she stood for us. She had gone through it herself and it completely changed her life. She went from hardly being able to make eye contact with people and working really shit jobs to really taking herself on and becoming a coach and creating this amazing business and leading women's circles. And so, she really led the way for me in that way. And so from that moment, I remember it was the second day of a 3-day experiential, immersive leadership experience. It was the second day, and I remember floating in the infinity pool. This was in San Diego, California, and looking up at the birds flying by. And I, everything in my body said, everything is going to be different now, and everything has. And so that was really the turning point. And now I just turned 38 this month, so it's been 20 years almost to the day.
I never knew that story about you. Well, I knew bits and pieces, but I didn't know, just that moment, right? It's like we have these moments that are ingrained in our DNA. And I believe it's through that emotional experience, right? Of like you remember that moment floating in the pool, looking at the sky, being held by water, and knowing that your life was forever changed. And I'm also looking at your website here where you talk about all of the things, the master empowerment coach, the serial entrepreneur, women's advocate, and then you say mother, daughter, sister, friend, and you have 2 daughters. And I was just talking about this with another sister today about like, gosh, if they would teach children these things in school, like if they would teach children how to breathe, how to feel their feelings, right? How to meet those parts of self, right? Those shadowy, crunchy, salty parts of self. And yeah, I would love to go there with you around knowing that your mother supported you and your sister and advocated for you and how you get to continue on with that legacy and what you're doing in your service work and in the confines of your own home to support this movement that, we're ushering into at this time.
Absolutely. My mom was always big on emotional literacy. And I was one like deep feeler, no problem there. My sister, on the other hand, would be flooded by emotions and wouldn't be able to identify them. So I don't know if you remember the emotions bear, where you like put together the bear and put on the face with the like the frown or the smile. And so like my earliest memories are around emotional education and a high value on caring for people. That was something that was modeled. The big distinction, though, that I have learned and stand by in my own mothering is whatever we're doing, are we doing it from love or fear? And that's really so important to me, the heartbeat around relating to the world and relating to parenting, relate through the lens of love, not fear, because whatever we're doing, it's like the quality of of where are we coming from as we're teaching our children or exploring or our own relationship to life. And so that is up big time right now. For me, my father, as you know, took his life. He died by suicide a little over 5 years ago, and it tremendously shaped me. And there's another member in our family right now who's in a complete mental crisis moment, and got some news this morning that's really scary. And just um peace of mind, and that the the moment in the pool, I'm just going to circle back, the moment in the infinity pool, why life was never going to be the same, always different, was because I really got it. It was like an inner switch that, oh, life isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. And when we realize that we're powerful creators, powerful co-creators, and that like truly just understand on every part of us that life is happening for us, not to us, it's like putting on a different set of goggles. Like, oh my gosh, this whole new world opens up. And so that is my intention and aim, that my daughters get to experience that. And also it's the biggest surrender to know that they came here with their own divine assignments. And I'm not in charge. And they're 12 and a half and 14 and a half. And it's definitely the most awe-inspiring and the most talk about love in action, right? I'm sure that other mamas here listening can relate to that. It's like nothing else.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I am gathering research right now of all my conscious mama friends, right? And that seems to be a theme, right? That thematic of like, where do we start? Like, where do we allow them to make mistakes and to learn and to grow in their own way? And where or do we protect? And I could imagine that line is constantly shifting and changing. And it's probably a very gray line. And how scary to know that you created a human, right? And as a dependent of you, right? Until the age of 18, right? Just like that responsibility, but also, like you said, knowing that divine assignment and knowing in the back of your mind. And what I love about you is how open and honest you are, right? So it's like knowing that you have the awareness of that divine assignment. It doesn't mean that we always honor it in that moment because we're human. So, can we talk about the humanness of that? Because the other day, I heard you say our humanity is our superpower. And I was like, okay, I realize now our humanity is our superpower once we're reconnected to our divinity. Like, right?
Mm,
Once we are truly reconnected, our humanity is everything. It's the experience of life. It's smelling the gardenias that I have here in a beautiful vase that I pulled from my backyard, right? It's motherhood and all of the lessons and learnings and how that's supporting you in your evolution as well. So, do you want to go there for a minute? Because that's why I believe you and I are reconnected again in this incarnation, is like the willingness to be open about the hardships and the mistakes and the shadow and the getting it wrong in order to alchemize what we know to be true in our hearts.
100%. Absolutely. So, yeah, so I call my girls angels all the time. And it's really been important to me in the last year just to give add-ons, like that angels are all of it, right? Like mean and sassy and bitchy and nasty, and that, like, it's like the divinity in the light and the shadow. So that's like a big piece of my my parenting right now, as they are fully in puberty, and I mean, it's a whole new world. So yeah, not glorifying just the parts that are acceptable by society. Something happened last year that really tested me around this, and I'm just going to assume it's okay, so I won't reveal names, but one of my daughters really can be very pointed and sharp, at least at this stage, and disconnected emotionally, and lash out. And so something happened that was revealed that got really escalated, and she got asked to leave the school. And this was like the hold on to, our beautiful young years in Waldorf. And it was like, oh my God. And the amount of like shaming from the other parents, and it escalated so fast. And so there were a few pieces to it. Like, we've gone through a lot of change, COVID, distance learning. She didn't respond well to distance learning, real estate fraud, divorce, moving across the country. She's experienced a lot of disruption. So I got to really look at like, where did I co-create this? Like, where does she get to be supported? Found a really amazing therapist who's been an amazing ally. But it really brought me to a lot of my own shame around like, oh my gosh, like, how could I have allowed my child to be like the mean one? And like, oh my gosh, the stigma of like, you're not welcome here, like, you need to leave. It brought up a lot of pain, and it was really uncomfortable to witness her be so disconnected from her impact, and just the patience around like creating the space for her to drop into her impact, and like the weeping that happened for a few weeks, and like just that, like, seeing her really at this new like stage of her experience where, yeah, she's not an extension of me, like, okay, like, here we go, the individuation is happening. And so that was definitely, I mean, that's definitely a human moment, just like, how do we, yeah, like, being in communities and in relationship, and the messiness and the humanness. The biggest part for me at this step of it, because this is now maybe 8 months ago, is, yeah, I really got to see my bias, that I still have a bias, that to be nice is to be better. To apologize is to be better. And her therapist has questioned me, and I'm so grateful for her perspective. Like, really, like, why are you rushing her to apologize when she's not ready to apologize? What if she's never ready to apologize? Like, what in you is this triggering? And she also got to really feedback to me that my bias towards people who are warm-hearted rather than tough-minded, and that actually both warm-heartedness and tough-mindedness are two sides of love. And so I just feel like I'm deep in it with my children as my teachers, and I don't presume to know what's right. Like, I think, right, the other, the opposite of a truth is another truth. So it's so paradoxical, and it's really dynamic. And I just, and I think this is where, before we hit record, you and I were talking about this, like, around, how sovereignty in relationship, whether it's motherhood or with friends or with clients, and then also that, like, the interconnectedness, like, when to be in which role. So that's just a little bit behind the curtain on this.
Don't you love how, right, we're having a brief conversation off record, and then it's tying back in, which is the subtle energetics of like, okay, this is where we get to go. And we see it, right? Every relationship is just a mirror of our relationship with self. And what actually emerged as you were talking about that is like that deep rooted wound from century after century around bringing shame onto the family, and how families were excommunicated from villages and from towns, right? And like that disgrace that is put upon us, and how so much of that lives inside of our DNA. And I just was like, okay, this is how, like, to me, it's like Sasha meeting this part of herself, like whether it's ancient or whether it's from this lifetime or a little bit of both, just like healing your wounds, and as a byproduct the collective heals, and as a right, and consciousness shifts. And I also want to circle back to, because right before you were talking about your dad, I had this memory of you sharing how you went to this grieving retreat. And I believe one daughter or both of your daughters were there. And so I'd love for you to share about that, right? Because you feeling your emotions during this traumatic time in your life and this time of loss and whatever you were experiencing, to not hide that from your daughters feels important to talk about. And it's almost like the evolution. Like, I just have all this running through my mind right now of like, what if that was you teaching your daughters the foundation, and this is now them practicing? Like, this is your daughter in her adolescence practicing, how do I act from love or fear? Oops, I think I acted out of fear. Whoopsie. Well, now I know. And now I have this spaciousness to experiment, right? And to learn.
So, yes, after my father's death, it really, I was at the peak of my career. My coaching business was thriving. We had just sold a few of our other brick and mortar businesses. I hosted my first in-person 3-day event at a huge hotel. Like, I was on the up, and I had taken on a lot more responsibility because of the state I was in. And then it was as if like someone just came with a bulldozer and like knocked me down. And it was so, talk about bringing shame to the family. I felt humiliated. The fact that the universe had set it up where I was needing to be so public facing for me, as you know, like I couldn't just retreat and cut off all responsibility. Like there was something around the like being visible and in relationship and supporting people with their transformation while I was in this very messy grief process was the most humiliating experience of my life. And I've come into deep reverence for that initiation. And so it's interesting you touched on that reflection around like the lifetimes of that. So I've alchemized that, and there's like major codes in it. Part of how I was able to do that was through a grief ritual that happened. I went with my daughters in Northern California. It's called the Women's Herbal Symposium. It's so good for any like hippie priestesses that want to reconnect with herbs and plants and medicines. It's just, oh, it's amazing. And so I went with one of my best friends and her kids, and we camped. And I wasn't even searching. I was just a shell. It was maybe 6 months after, fresh. And I was, like suicidal ideations. Like I was learning about complex grief and just trying to cope, like working 50 hours a week in my business, full-time momming, all of this. Things were going down with my husband at that point, who decided to go raw vegan like a month before this all happened. So it's like everything is changing really fast. And so the kids were all off. It was nighttime. There was a big campfire. This is over many, many acres. And a woman, Laura Lowen Treadaway, she's a shaman. She's unlike anyone I've ever met. And she led a group grief ritual. And she too has Irish heritage. And I didn't know that public keening was banned in the 40s in Ireland, that women would come and grief, like process their grief through noisemaking and keening. And it was outlawed in the late 40s. And I had never heard of it. And I naturally make a lot of sound. Like one of my coping mechanisms was like getting in the car and like screaming and hitting. And like I would do, but something about like the intentionality, the weaving of our prayers, and the like going to the wailing wall. And she guided us through this process. And I just sobbed and yelled. And one of the most profound things about this is that all the women match whatever the noise is. So if there's like soft crying, there's like this, you hear this like circle of soft crying. If you're yelling, there's yelling. And so Laura, I was so loud, and she was like, come on. And like everyone got to rise to like meet me in my expression. And I'll never forget when I was like at a pause point, I look over and there's Aria. There's my girl. And I'm just going to say it's Aria who had the whole thing last year. Aria, if you're listening to this, I love you.
We love you, Aria, and we love your emotions.
We love all of you. I love the tough mindedness and the warm heartedness. And She was so little. She heard me crying from so far away and brought herself and witnessed the whole thing, and she sat in that chair for hours for the whole process. It was so profound. So, yeah, thank you for letting me get to share that.
Yeah, and not knowing the details and now knowing that it was your daughter Aria in that moment and circling back to this new moment and how, right, like you have this newfound awareness of, right, like, oh, wow, I am not my daughter and I'm also my daughter, right? It's that both and like that separation piece and that unification piece of like, you are her, you carry all of that inside of you, and you don't have to hold on to whatever is that that bubbling up piece. It's bubbling up for you to for your own healing and evolution. And
Mm,
I just envision this world like I want to go to this retreat because I think you and I have talked about this a bit off the record is like practicing. Can we be that loud in the confines of our own home? Can we be that loud when we're outside and we're wanting to process emotions? Can we just be that loud around our beloveds and feel safe
mm,
to express in that way? And just the shift that you're making just again through your two daughters alone is I mean that's huge. And then of course all of the other beautiful work that you do, it's so powerful. And I'm noticing these threads now that are moving through because this week I haven't taught a workshop in a while, and this workshop title called Wound Wisdom has been emerging for me.
mm,
And I think I was going to call it how to alchemize the deepest shadow into your divine light. And this is it. Like this is what I feel. And I've been updating my website a bit. You and I have been chatting because you're still supporting me in some consulting over where I'm moving my business. But like it's like, oh, I know why I'm here now. Like this is that piece, the feeling piece, the expression piece, how much shame is put upon us for unleashing,
mm,
and the practice of
mm,
same thing with my honey. Like I can unleash not at him, right? It's like I can unleash in front of him, and he now knows and has created the space to witness me in that. And I've practiced the discernment of when am I unleashing onto him through a wound, through fear, and when am I just allowing this energy to move and be my fullest expression and just let it erupt so that I then can like come back to center and find my words and be able to have a conversation with him about what's emerging for me.
mm.
So anything that you want to add to that feels important.
Definitely. Well, it's interesting about this. Yeah, the safety to make noise. So, in this 2 week period after all of this went down, abruptly, she's left the school, left the volleyball team. It's just she's sitting in her experience of cause and effect. And after a certain amount of time, I just met her there and said, "It's okay, right? It's okay to make a mess, to make mistakes. Like, it's important to feel the impact, I believe, right? Like to go there to make sure there is empathy and understanding, but not to stay in there." So once I really felt that, I was like, I told her about some things that I've done, big mistakes, big messes. And then it was a full moon that night, and I was like, "Let's go out and make some noise." And so we took the gong out and we sneak up the steps, and there's this whole thing, and we're in like the suburbs, and we start hitting the shit out of this gong. And all the neighbors are like, "What the fuck is that?" Blah, blah, blah. And it's something just took us over. We were like priestesses dancing in the night under the moon. And my mom came out furious because we're living at my mom's right now. We're in this sacred in between time of like my old life and the new life that's happening. And we laughed so hard, and there was some sort of transmission that happened in that.
Mm,
And it's just it's really powerful. And so yeah, like starting to, modeling that, like being a disruptor with intention, or just being ourselves, knowing, and you and I talk about this a lot, like we both hold codes that can activate, or I forget the other word that you said, but trigger.
Unnerving. Yeah,
Yeah,
trigger or unnerving.
yeah. So like, just yeah, it's quite a thing, and ultimately where that sense of safety comes in, and the discernment. I had a betrayal from someone close to me, a woman in my life, the first betrayal from a woman in my life in this lifetime that I remember. And my kids were really privy to it and the impact. And so I do feel like it is so much like the first period of supporting women, whether it's my children or the first few steps of the empowerment process. It's so insulated, it's so protective, it's all about nurture, it's all about love, it's all about safety. And then it's like, okay, they're resourced, it's time to now go out, like you were saying. So yeah, the noise making is so big for both of us, I know. And it's really I really do just experiment. I'm continuing to experiment. I always will on this one, on the sounded.
Yeah, same. And when you were talking about the therapist with the apology piece, because you and I were talking again off the record around like dissolving of relationships, and I'm noticing like I just don't feel the shifting of relationships as much and the dissolving as much, like just being in full trust of that. And there's times where I am in deep process of like alchemizing or like being in forgiveness or apologizing for someone who's no longer in my life, who's someone who's no longer on this planet, who's someone that I don't feel ready to connect with in that way. And then there's times where a conversation feels important and feels warranted. And so there's that piece where I'm noticing like, oh yeah, I can have this conversation with myself and it can feel complete.
Mhm.
And that conditioning that the world wants to tell us, like, this is the only way to be in forgiveness. This is the only way to apologize or to recognize. I love what you said. Like, instead of an apology, it's like, yeah, let's recognize the impact. That's it. Like, let's not apologize for any aspect of who we are. Let's feel it. Let's be with it. Let's create the space so that we can recognize the impact. And once we're in that grounded, anchored space, we then have the information to know what to do with that. Oh my gosh, so profound, Sasha.
Mm.
And you just reminded me that I'm moving in with my dad temporarily in the in between of moving from Sarasota to Asheville. And so I'm like
Ah!
noticing things are coming up for me. That
Huh.
like there's fears. There's like, oh my gosh, I've got my altar back here. Or like, what if we fight? Or like, what if he sees me? Or what if like there's a part of me that I don't want to show? And then I'm like, oh, and what if I signed up for this for
Mm.
some deep healing work? So has there been any healing that has happened while living with your mom in this in between time between your old life and your new life?
So much. It's been so profound. When I look back at my deathbed, this will be one of the highlights.
Mhm.
And this is where the universe really came in and made a mess for me to move in with my mom. And I'm like, oh, the divine perfection of this had to happen. This had to happen. I was supposed to be here. And in addition to, my mom just turned 61, and so she has been chronically overweight for my entire life. And I used to hold on to a prayer of like her losing all the weight and like feeling safe in her radiating her beauty and like in certain ways. Like I won't go into things with her. So during this time she has been on a profound release journey and has released over 80 pounds and is continuing. Like, this is just like she's on a trajectory because of choices where she's releasing all of the excess weight and protection. So not only has it been like, I feel like her soul called me as her eldest daughter to come and bear sacred witness, which has been really profound. There's also been a ripple effect around just that, the belonging and the witnessing and like the deep trust in everything is as it should be. And so, yeah, like witnessing her and her transformation, her being such an ally, she was really encouraging of me to get divorced when I did. I went all in with my ex-husband and we did all of the therapies and all of the things. And I was like, I finally reached a crossroads, and she was the one that said, you can do this. It's going to be really hard and you can do this, and do it now. Don't wait until the kids are grown. Like, do it now. And
Mm.
she had never given me advice before, but this was after a lot. And so there's something too around this transition, and also, like you were saying, this opportunity to not bend or change who I am. I parent the same way I parent as if we lived alone, and we don't agree on all things. And some things that I've been doing around healing my relationship with the sacred masculine and getting to her to witness me in this incredible love relationship with my boyfriend, and, saying my mantras out loud. I love men and men love me. That triggers a lot of women. It brings like the anger, the unintegrated, unlooked at anger. And so there's been so many tears, so much laughter. It's been so healing to crawl in bed with her, and be holding all of these roles so intimately. So it's felt like one big extended like summer camp out. So yeah, I could go on
Oh,
and on. The healing's been profound, and I know it's rippling in all directions.
well, I would love to reflect back to you, because you may not remember that when you told me you were moving in with your mother, you mentioned that you thought that this would happen with the releasing for your mom, like
Oh,
before it happened. So that trust factor of like, even before that you had actually moved in, of
mm.
like, wow, I feel like it's going to be deeply healing for myself and for my mom. And of course, your girls get to receive that ripple. So do you remember telling me that?
Now I am. And now I want to ask you, do you have any insight around the healing that's going to happen while you're living with your dad and your husband?
Yeah. It's funny. I was like, should I go there? Should I not? And now I wanna. Yeah. So I've always had a close relationship with my dad, but there's still this like wanting to please and like really wanting him to accept me, and like noticing even with the selling of my house, like where I want his opinion and where I want to make sure he's approving my decisions, and just like noticing when I do that, and then noticing when it's not in alignment, and like my wounds that come up and my triggers, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting to explore. And so much of my spiritual journey, I've been so afraid with my family more than anyone else. Like I could go on a podcast, I could go on social media, but the second that my immediate family knows truly who I am at my core, there's a deep rooted fear of not belonging and of feeling like rejection is going to like they're just going to say, whoa, who are you? Or whoa.
Mm,
And that has not been my experience, right? It's like the mind creates these constructs that like, you don't want to do this, you don't want to go there because you will not belong. And so much of my journey over the last couple years in this awakening journey has been like, I belong to myself. Like that has been my mantra. I belong to myself. And everything outside of that is just a bonus. And that supported me in just honoring the integrity of who I am. And what I've found is, even though my family doesn't understand, there's a lot of curiosity, and there's a lot of like, how do you know this? Or like, wow, this is deeply inspirational. And like, wow, you're really helping people, right? Like that, like, I have no idea what you're doing, and I'm curious. And it's teaching me that I don't need to fix anyone. I don't need to like shift anything in my family dynamics or anything with anyone in my life. I just get to be myself. And when people get curious enough, I get to share more of my world. And so I don't feel the need to divulge everything with my family. And yet, if they see something online or they tune into my podcast, that's where like writing the book, sharing about the near drowning experience and like how my dad was watching me. And I feel like I'm healing to circle back a deep wound of the unhealed masculine within me through my relationship with my father. And I love him, and he is like my world. And noticing the parts of me that are, it's more of, I'm afraid for him to not belong to him anymore.
mm,
And I'm excited to explore that. Like, I'm afraid to move in there for temporarily. It's very short, but like, I'm also so excited because I know that I'm committed, and by default, he will continue to be committed to deepening our relationship and me being like, this is who I am, and not feeling the drag of all of that fear of what if.
Mm.
So I want to mention this before we wrap up because I feel that I thought that the rise of the feminine meant that we just needed to continue to connect with the feminine, and I left the masculine for many years. And what I'm finding is, for me, it's about healing the masculine wounding within me first, and the divine feminine is there, and she is ready to fill that chalice within me of life force. And that was a huge piece that I was missing, was, where am I in wounds around the church? Where am I in wounds around Father God? Where am I still afraid to be my full self with my father, and afraid of what he may think of me? And that feels like the piece of integration that is going to catapult me, as we're in this eclipse portal, into this next layer of true self-expression and true honoring of self. So yeah, I would love your thoughts on that, and if that feels resonant or related to the unhealed masculine, and
Totally.
any and all.
Well, I started crying. I don't know if you saw that when you're talking about your relationship with your father, and I'm just, oh, so happy with you. I'm so excited to hear all the things that happen in your brief time together, living together, and then in your new home. And I agree 100%. Back in 2015, my mom invited me to go on one of her goddess pilgrimages to Glastonbury. She had an extra room, and so I went, and um, the girls were maybe 4 and 6, something like that. They were little, and I went in search for the divine feminine. And when I got there, I was met over and over by the divine masculine. So in this sacred place, Glastonbury, England, there's all these goddess sites and goddess centers. So it's like, went to the White Spring, which is like, in honor of the divine feminine, and there, floating in the spring water naked, was an elderly man. And there were all these men chanting and singing in honor to the goddess with candles everywhere. And then went to the priestess center, like this place up these stairs, and I'm going to be initiated by the priestess, and I met by a priest of the goddess. And he was in all purple. And I was like, what's happening? Like, I just kept going, like, to find the divine feminine, and I was met by the divine masculine that supports the divine feminine. So there's all these stories of going to these, it was so repetitive. And so I got the codes of that, the divine, the healthy resource divine masculine, because I really didn't have that previously with my own. I love my father so much, and like, he ran a lot of fear and ran a lot of, just, there were so many things that he wanted to meet me, but he couldn't. I feel like my relationship with my father was, he loved me unconditionally and fully, and I am my father, and I'm also not my father. And from the time of very little, like 4 years old, I remember being at a movie with him, the father of the bride, and thinking like, oh, that looks so nice. And looking at my dad, that's not my experience this lifetime, and I just always had this image of him tossing me up as high as he could. That was the best he could do for me. And that was a lot. And he, like, so anyway, so from that time, I came home from Glastonbury, and it was all about divine masculine. It's been all this last, 7-year cycle was all around understanding, like you said, the chalice, like, oh, the container for the divine feminine that I already am. There's nowhere to seek. It was more about being held and met. And so that's been so my journey, and the culmination of really going all in on that has been profound, to say the least. And now I'm in another chap cycle, and I'm integrated in. But it's no accident that the man who we both know, who was actually like supported in divine masculine in my life, Aaron Glassman, he co-owns the cottage that houses the White Spring.
Mhm.
And he just went back in pilgrimage. So it's just, there's so many things. It's only, like the saying, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. It just, I'm so in awe of how magical life really can be when we allow it to be.
Yeah, and we don't have to get into all the details, but now you're calling in some divine masculine yumminess in your life. You've called in, I shall say. And I see it with my husband all the time too. Like I told you, Sasha, that I watched this documentary called The Burning Times, and I'm really connecting with the persecution of women, and it was really women, men and children, but 75 to 85% were women.
Mm,
9 million, 75 to 85% women in the 14th and 15th century. And like they're calling it the Holocaust of women of those times, and just how much it's not talked about. And I remember my husband coming in and being like, yeah, babe, like just talking about just how everything transpired. And my husband was like, yeah, babe, I wasn't one of those men. And I believed him. And I feel like we've called each other back in this lifetime for him to just like witness me, like you said. And it's like the practice behind closed doors of him witnessing me and him not judging this awakening journey at all, not understanding it, but not judging it at all, and letting that be the foundation for practicing with my dad and other men who come into my life, and just people in general. Um,
mm,
which feels so profound. So, to me, this is the shift in frequency in terms of the archetype of the masculine and feminine codes that are coming online, and that sacred union. So thank you for sharing these beautiful stories with
mm,
me.
mm,
All right, my love, let everyone know how they can reach you and get in touch with you, and all of the ways that these people can enter your world. I usually do an intro before this
mhm,
on my own. So just be prepared that I'm going to gawk over Sasha, and I'm going to like give you why she's literally probably top 5 favorite humans I've ever met in my life. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it when I'm in the privacy of my recording studio master bedroom closet to share my heart with you all on how much I respect you as a woman, as a mother, as a friend, as an ally, and just like leaning into all of it. So I would highly encourage you all to connect with Sasha in one way, and to receive her medicine, because she's got a lot to offer.
Thank you, Lindsay, so much. I receive all of that and reflect it all back to you as well. And so, yeah, if you're, enjoyed this conversation and want to stay connected, I have my own podcast. It's called Exploring All That Is Sacred. I would love for you to come on over there and follow. And also, I am a master empowerment coach, and I'm working with a small number of women on their awakening journey. So you can connect with me at my website, sign up for my email list, and be first to know about all of the other amazing things, retreats and courses and things like that.
Thank you. Any final wisdom nuggets to leave our beloved community with before we pop off, if they're in the middle of their dark night of the soul, or just in it right now during this eclipse time, just feeling all the feels?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So yes, there is something. So in the times in any time, the quickest way to co-create the reality that we want is to really connect to the desired feeling state. How do you want to feel? You don't need to know the details. And that was the biggest advice that Aaron gave me when I was going through my divorce journey. And I started to do what a lot of people do. They make the list. Oh, this is who I want. This is this. And he's like, stop. Drop into the feeling of how you want to feel in his presence. Who is he? Like, feel. And long story short, my man Joel, we've been together a year next month. He also is on his spiritual path, and he connected to the feeling state of me and wrote a whole manifesto of who I am in detail, how we feel, and he overlaid it, him speaking with speaking it, overlaying it with the heart frequency sound. And he would listen to this on repeat every night for 4 months. And we met about 5 months after that. And I have never felt more spiritually wanted. So, and that was really like the feeling of and so just like playing with the power of emotion, which I know, is we've talked about like around in different ways, but the way to manifest through emotion is really connecting to the feeling. Like, how do you want to feel? Not bypassing any emotions that you're experiencing now, but just the emotional manifestation is something that I think everybody can benefit from. So that's where I'll leave it today.
And you just reminded me that I think we were on the phone as you were walking up to your date. You were wearing that. Remember, you were like, I'm wearing this dress. You were wearing like a red dress, was it? And you were walking. I think it was the first time you were meeting him. Was that right?
I think it wasn't that one because I knew I was going to meet him. And so I was
Okay.
quiet, but it was the second date. I had a very short dating window. I dated 3 men in 2 weeks and went on like three. Anyway, and Joel was the third match. So anyway, it was
Okay.
the whole thing. Yes, it was the second guy,
I
but
just remember you were like, I'm walking down the street and the sun is shining on. I was just talking to you and you were just so in your element and so vibrant. And so you were just like, and you told me the story about how all of this was coming together. So again,
oh, it was that. Yes, you're right. It was that. I was Voxering you or something. Okay, I'll go back and look at the date stamp. Yes.
yeah. And I think it's just supportive for me because it's like the beginning pieces of you, right? We weren't going to go there, but this is like, this is why it's so supportive to call in your allies too, or to have some sort of archives, whether you journal or you have a podcast or whatever it is, because with you moving in with your mom, it's like you felt the healing, the deep healing that was going to happen. And now you're in it and you're integrating it and you're on the other side.
Yeah.
Same thing with calling in your beloved Joelle. And I forgot about that. And I just was like, oh my gosh, like I visioned, I could feel what you looked like in my mind's eye as you were talking about you walking up to go meet him.
That's right. I think okay, I remember this now. Yes. It's so funny, the memory keepers, and that's, yeah, I'll just share one last thing. Like I have a collaborative empowerment project movement with some friends called Be Sisterhood, and we have a retreat coming up next month, and Lindsay's going to
I'll
be
be
there for
there.
part of it. And so yeah, I think this is really important about the allies, like who we surround ourselves with really matters. So if you're looking to spend in-person time, meet some new friends, be witnessed, have that, the level of really like, I don't know what the word is. I'm falling blank. That doesn't feel like there's any, but like quality, sincere women who are on their path. We'd love to have you there. So you can check it out at Be Sisterhood, BEE sisterhood.com.
And I'll put everything in the show notes. And Sasha had me on her podcast a couple months back as well. And so I'll make sure to put all of the amazing ways to connect with you in the show notes below. So yes, I'll be at the retreat. And I always say yes to what Sasha's offering as long as like I'm in that space of receiving, because she's the real deal. And she walks the walk, she talks the talk, and it's always in full integrity and transparency, which I so appreciate. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We went deep in this one. It was yummy. I can't wait to go back and listen and to glean the wisdom from this episode. And we'll catch you next week for another episode of Soul Shine Radio. Much love.